Genius bar. That was you know you're a drug addict when a genius bar is a trigger. This is Anthony Boza, my co-author.
Very happy to be here. Very happy you're here.
Yeah. And I'm holding an iPad for the first time in my life. So I have to, I'm going to read, the first thing to do is read an excerpt from the book, right? All right. Well, this is a part of the book. After I got into a fight with my assistant on the Howard Stern show on the air, I thought it'd be a good idea to go on a 5-day bachelor party to Amsterdam. This is an excerpt from a book about that trip. This is from Crash and Burn. Things started out all right because I slept through most of the flight, but what really helped was that I was booked into a different hotel than the other guys. I had the cash to burn, so I booked a suite in a 5-star establishment a couple of miles away from them. The first night I crashed hard because I still had a lot to sleep off, but by 4 p.m. the next day, I was rested and ready to begin my version of a well-earned vacation. Isolation and getting high. I had no problem celebrating Jason's upcoming nuptials my way, because in my mind, that was still honoring him. So I got into a cab and told the driver to find me some fun. He took one look at me and made a beeline for the red light district, where I bought a bunch of pills from some guy on the street who was wearing a beret. I remember wondering if that was Amsterdam code for dealer holding. As a rule, berets pissed me off on sight, and I refused to talk to anybody wearing them. But this guy got a pass for life. He had every opiate I'd ever heard of. So I bought a sack of pills, then went looking for a hooker, which is my chaser of choice for a double shot of opiates. I found myself a solid 7 and negotiated a rate that would get her back to my hotel. This chick was a hooker through and through, which is really what you want when hiring a prostitute. Any guy who kids himself that a woman for hire is his girlfriend, even while it's happening, is a complete idiot. The fucking business is a fucking business, so act accordingly and everyone will go home happy. This broad was amazing. Just completely a prostitute. There was no way anyone at the hotel. Bellboy to the bartender to the desk clerk manning the graveyard shift was going to address her as Mrs. Lange. And she was so accommodating, as high as I was at the time, I will never forget how understanding she was that I hadn't changed my American dollars into euros. She and I spent the rest of the night talking while crushing and snorting every flavor we could find in a bag of pills I'd scored. She spoke decent English, and we only had sex once, because like drug addicts will do, the time we spent together was all about the drugs. I was enjoying myself, so the next day I refused to get in touch with the other guys, even though they left me a few messages. I remember back to shooting Dirty Work in Toronto in 1998 with Chris Farley, because Farley would pay whores to just sit around, smoke weed with him, and keep him company because he was lonely. That's where my head was at, before banging her once. I was fascinated by the idea of paying a pretty woman to be my friend for the day. I was as far gone as Farley had been. I just wanted to spend an afternoon with a friend who wouldn't judge any awful thing I did. When it comes to hookers, the sex is secondary in my opinion. The love you rent from them isn't real, but it's unconditional. And when you're using, struggling drug addict, love and a lack of judgment are exactly what you need. I never got a real name, but I did make one up for her. This brought in my mind, I started calling her Whore Guy. Because the moment we got outside, she started giving me the history of the city. She was incredible. I started enjoying her company so much that I dodged all the guys' calls and texts and took her on a cruise through the canals of the city. I was staying at the Dillon, which is a very posh hotel, and there were sightseeing boats parked outside in the canal waiting to take rich tourists sightseeing by water. It was downright wholesome. Me, the guy driving the boat, and Whore Guy, taking in Amsterdam's historical highlights together. We saw centuries-old townhouses, government buildings, famous residences, the Anne Frank house, and all of this and more lay on either side in all of its splendor. Once again, I've got to hand it to Whore Guide. She was one informed whore. She knew more about the history of Amsterdam than the boat tour guide by a long shot. The only thing he taught me was where to get breakfast. That guy whom, for the sake of argument, we're going to call Goebbels, had a crisp Dutch accent and a high-strung voice. Basically, he sounded like a friendly Nazi. The way a counselor at a Hitler Youth summer camp might be. His Aryan nature became especially clear to me when he started talking about the Anne Frank house, explaining in great detail how long her family had hidden in the attic with the kind of restrained glee that all Nazis have when discussing the suffering of Jews. Now that I think about it, he was more of a repentant Nazi, While highlighting the finer points of the house and Anne Frank's story as if he didn't want to reveal himself, it was all very rehearsed, and I felt like I was watching Yul Brynner do his 5,000 performance of The King and I. Once he finished talking about the Franks, though, he became his sinister, joyful self. Now, he said, his voice getting louder and his eyes getting wider, if you look just past the Anne Frank house, you'll see a great place for pancakes. If I kid you not, he shouted the word pancakes as if you were saying Heil Hitler. Part of Crash and Burn. Well, before I read that, I realized my mother was here.
I think we're going to do some questions with Art. As you guys know, this is our second book we've written together. First one was Too Fat to Fish. I don't know if anyone's read that. Has anyone read Crash and Burn yet?
Woo!
All right. Very nice.
Yeah.
Fast readers. We like that. All
I
right.
appreciate it.
This is a very different project, as I'm sure those of you who've read it already know. Art, what was when we started getting together again, it was a little bit different than last time. The other one was your entire life. This is a specific period of time.
Right.
What was the easiest and hardest part about jumping in the writing boat again, which is probably different than the boat you were in Amsterdam?
Well, the hardest part was, realizing I had to write about the last 5 years. I mean, that's what the publisher wanted, and that was going to be very difficult because it was a very hard time in my life. Too Fat to Fish had done so well that I got an $800,000 advance for the next book, and the first, thank you very much, and I'm just saying that for the broads here. But I got 200 grand immediately. That was the first payment. So after I got the 200,000, a couple weeks later, I crashed and burned, and I didn't do anything for a year and a half. And I got out of rehab a year and a half later. My agent called me and said, "Art, that's great, that you're feeling good, but if you don't write this book, you're gonna have to pay back the $200,000." So that was the easy part. I said, "I'm gonna write a book about whatever you want." So I spent the 200,000 mostly on clothes.
You went to the shows in Paris?
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, so I was like, it's money, and maybe it'll help somebody. This book is so hardcore and honest. I'm hoping that it helps someone decide not to do heroin. It's not a good move in life.
Yeah. What was, obviously the hardest parts of the book, we probably all guessed what they were. Was there anything that, even after getting sober and even talking through the stuff with me several times before we sort of committed it to paper, was there any part that you thought would be easy that wasn't?
I don't think any of it will be easy, just because of, having to write about the morning that I tried to commit suicide was, that's sort of like where the book takes a different turn. And Too Fat to Fish really didn't have anything like that in it, that harrowing. And knowing that was coming, it was like this hurricane that you knew you had to walk through, that I was just procrastinating about. Once I got through that part, the book became easier. But because that was in the middle of it, nothing about it was easy at all. And it's even harder to reread after it's done,
Yeah, I found that hard to even be your co-pilot on because it's so, let's face it, that's probably the hardest thing I hope I ever have to be a part of either.
Yeah. I'm surprised a lot of people say, did all that stuff really happen? Like, no, I'm making that up.
We went fiction for the middle 2 chapters, so let it be known. Fairy tale.
Yeah. I thought that would sell books.
Was there